On December 29, 2019, Carlos Ghosn prepared to leave Japan with mixed emotions. 2 decades earlier, he had arrived in first class. Now, he was leaving in a manner more akin to smuggling a pet. Once celebrated as one of the world's most successful professional managers and the savior of Nissan at the start of the 21st century, Ghosn had restored the company to prominence. However, after spending a year in jail, he knew that if he didn't act now, he could face another decade behind bars. With the help of several operatives, Ghosn concealed himself inside a box designed for stage props. His accomplices transported the box to a small private airport in Osaka, where a plane awaited to fly him out of the country. To make his journey more humane, the operatives drilled a few holes at the bottom of the box. However, before boarding, the group was stopped by security personnel who wanted to scan the luggage and peered through the small holes. Ghosn heard the most chilling joke of his life: "This box is too big. I bet there's a beautiful Japanese woman inside, and you're trying to smuggle her out of Japan." Ghosn's heart pounded. If the box underwent an X-ray scan, his escape while on bail would be exposed, and he might spend the rest of his life in a tiny cell of less than 5 square meters. The operatives quickly objected to the security demand, claiming the box contained delicate equipment unsuitable for scanning. Fortunately, Japan's rigid adherence to protocol saved him. According to regulations, luggage for private planes departing the country did not require thorough inspection. Thus, security relented, allowing them to proceed. In this manner, the former dual head of Nissan and Renault, a man under strict police surveillance and nearly completely cut off from the outside world for almost a year, managed to take off from Osaka. As 2020 approached, he left the Japanese prosecutors with a humiliating New Year's gift. How did this automotive tycoon end up in such a predicament? The story begins in 1985. By the early 1990s, inflation in Brazil had skyrocketed, making everyday life and business incredibly volatile. People couldn't hold on to their wages for long because supermarket prices could triple in a single day. When Ghosn arrived in Brazil, he walked into a financial disaster. The company was buried in debt, with overwhelming interest payments. Efforts to repay the debt seemed pointless because the Brazilian government had strict controls that prevented price hikes. Each tire sold resulted in a loss, causing the debt to grow even larger. Local distributors were demanding, requiring goods up front and only paying after a 2-month billing cycle. By the time payments were received, inflation had already halved the value of the money. Internally, the company was in chaos. Different factions within the management team were working against each other, leading to inefficiency and misalignment. Despite the company's size, its survival up to that point seemed nothing short of miraculous. Reversing its declining fortunes was deemed nearly impossible. Ghosn, well acquainted with corporate challenges, knew from the start that his role as CEO was essentially that of a scapegoat, meant to take the blame. In such a situation, an ordinary manager might have been drafting a resignation letter. However, Ghosn, ever the optimist, saw it as a challenge worth tackling. He believed it might even lead to a promotion or a return to a leadership position. Ghosn was renowned for his bold, decisive cuts, earning a reputation for both ruthlessness and operational genius. Upon taking office, Ghosn implemented 3 major strategies. First, he restructured the organization by consolidating departmental powers into a core cross-functional management team to ensure efficient decision-making. Next, he tackled the debt by liquidating unused assets and selling off excess inventory. Lastly, he addressed wages by persuading the union to slow down wage increases, helping the company navigate tough times. Additionally, he convinced the distributors to switch to a cash-on-delivery system. Most importantly, Ghosn secured more flexible pricing rights from the government. With these strategies, it took just 1 year to balance the books and stabilize the company. By the third year, Brazil had become Michelin's most profitable overseas division. Ghosn's remarkable performance caught the attention of Michelin's head, François Michelin, who called Ghosn and said, "You've been doing a great job lately. I've been watching you, and I think you have potential. How about taking over as CEO of our North American operations?" To Ghosn, this sounded like destiny calling. After all, the North American market accounted for 35% of the company's revenue. If working in Brazil was like guerrilla warfare in the jungle, then the US market was a full-scale battlefront, a golden opportunity for anyone with ambition, especially with the boss's personal endorsement. So, in 1989, Ghosn took charge of Michelin North America, only to find another mess waiting for him. The company was grappling with chronic losses and had heavily invested in acquiring a local tire manufacturer, which proved impossible to integrate. Additionally, they faced fierce competition from industry giants like Goodyear and Japan's Bridgestone, making the CEO's position quite precarious. Fortunately, Ghosn, leveraging his strategic acumen honed in Brazil, established a cross-departmental management team to centralize decision-making. He then wielded his metaphorical big knife to make substantial cuts in North America. He shut down underperforming factories, eliminated unprofitable product lines, and merged departments where necessary. Additionally, he refined his supply chain management skills, expertly reducing procurement costs and shortening delivery cycles. Beyond his proficiency in cost-cutting, Ghosn was also adept at business development. He managed to retain General Motors as a major client and expanded the customer base to include Toyota, Honda, and Nissan. Under Ghosn's leadership, Michelin North America quickly became profitable and began expanding. This impressive turnaround earned Ghosn a place on the company's highest executive committee, second only to François Michelin in influence. However, Ghosn started to feel restless, realizing he had reached the peak of his career at Michelin. In 1993, François Michelin called Ghosn and asked if his son, Edouard Michelin, could go to the United States to learn management under Ghosn for 2 years. Hearing this, Ghosn felt a chill. The boss sending his heir to work under him marked the start of a power transition. Ghosn understood that the Michelin family would never hand over control to an outsider and just remain overseers. No matter how capable or highly regarded he would always be the second in command, a highly competent professional manager. For someone as ambitious as Ghosn, this realization was a constant source of discomfort, which only grew as his status rose. Nevertheless, with his high emotional intelligence, he agreed to the boss's request and handed over the most critical truck tire division in North America to the heir. Working with the heir went relatively smoothly. Soon, the 2 years were up, and Edouard Michelin returned to take the reins. Upon his return, Edouard announced a major restructuring of the company's management, shifting from a decentralized model led by regional branches to a centralized system with specialized divisions. As a regional leader and senior official from the previous regime, Ghosn couldn't help but feel targeted. Everyone in the company knew that a conflict between him and the heir was inevitable. Ghosn's control had been under assault for some time, and eventually, he would be sidelined as the new leader took over. At just over 40 and still in his prime, Ghosn knew he had to plan ahead. During this period, Renault extended an olive branch to him. Renault, a renowned French car manufacturer, was nationalized after World War II due to its collaboration with Nazi Germany under the strict direction of Charles de Gaulle. The goal was modest, profit wasn't the priority, but avoiding significant losses was. However, aiming low rarely yields great results. As globalization took hold in the 1980s, car manufacturers worldwide faced fierce competition. Without government support, Renault might have disappeared. To revive Renault, restructuring the state-owned enterprise was essential. In 1992, Louis Schweitzer became the CEO of Renault and began the privatization process. By 1996, the government stake had reduced to 44%. Yet, privatization alone wasn't a magic fix. Despite the reduced government influence, inefficient operations and bureaucratic management persisted, and the losses continued. The failed merger with Volvo and Schweitzer's unfulfilled international ambitions left Renault in a precarious state. Fortunately, Carlos Ghosn, renowned for his cost-cutting expertise, was brought in as vice president in 1996. Schweitzer saw Ghosn's extensive international experience and knack for cost reduction as perfectly aligned with Renault's dual goals, achieving internal profitability and expanding globally. Ghosn immediately demonstrated his cost-cutting skills by presenting a 3-year plan to reduce costs by 20 billion francs. Many executives were stunned by the ambitious scope of the plan, even questioning if it was a typo. They feared such drastic cuts would lead to strikes among employees and suppliers. Indeed, in 1997, Ghosn decided to close Renault's plant in Vilvoorde, Belgium, resulting in over 3,000 layoffs. This decision sparked intense protests, with employees taking to the streets of Paris in large demonstrations. The protests drew condemnation from the King of Belgium, pressure from the European Union, and dissatisfaction from the French government. Nonetheless, Ghosn remained laser-focused on one goal: cutting costs. Too many suppliers? Excess assembly lines? Cut. Departments with too much power operating independently? Each cut inevitably made enemies, but Ghosn was undeterred. Ghosn's stance was clear: political baggage and vested interests were irrelevant. His sole responsibility was to achieve profitability, and everything else was secondary until that goal was met. Fortunately, he had a supportive superior in Schweitzer who resisted pressure from the government and society, allowing Ghosn to make bold cuts without hesitation. Schweitzer also helped Ghosn form cross-departmental management teams and convinced department heads to cede some decision-making power. This enabled Ghosn to implement his cost-cutting strategies more effectively. Their collaboration turned Renault around in just a year. By 2000, Ghosn's 20 billion franc cost-cutting plan was completed, and Renault was making tens of billions of dollars in annual profits. Ghosn earned the nickname the Cost Killer. Following this campaign, Renault made it clear to the French government, "You are just the majority shareholder, not the operator. Let the professionals handle the business." Ghosn's decisive actions effectively ended the government's extensive control over Renault. From then on, Renault began operating more like a nimble private enterprise. Although the French government still held 15% of Renault's shares and voting rights, the company was now led by professional managers. With the cost-cutting completed, the next step was international expansion. In Ghosn's view, Renault had a solid presence in Europe but was practically unknown outside of it. A leading French automaker couldn't afford to be strong only at home. The company's scale was too small, and any significant disruption would force it to seek financial help from the government. Renault sought an overseas partner that met 3 specific criteria: its main market should not be in Europe, it should complement Renault, and it should be large enough to help reduce costs and share risks. Additionally, the partner shouldn't be too dominant, allowing Renault to maintain a leading role in the alliance. Few car companies globally met all these criteria. After careful consideration, Ghosn identified Nissan as the ideal partner. At that time, Nissan was ahead of Renault in terms of reputation, scale, and revenue. However, Nissan was in deep trouble. From 1991 to 1999, it experienced 8 consecutive years of declining market share. By the late 1990s, Nissan was on the brink of collapse. The bursting of Japan's economic bubble severely weakened domestic consumer spending, and Nissan's own business strategies made the situation worse. Simply put, Nissan was too rigid. In Japan, maintaining order is paramount. A company can fail, but its rules must remain intact. For example, the lifetime employment and seniority-based pay systems in Japanese workplaces ensure that employees are taken care of until retirement, as long as they don't make major mistakes. Additionally, as employees age, their benefits increase. Nissan had similar relationships with its upstream and downstream partners. Nissan was overly generous to its dealers. Whenever dealers complained about poor sales or financial struggles, Nissan would introduce new models to help them out. This led to overproduction, escalating costs, and mounting debt. Ideally, in a sluggish market, production should be reduced. However, Nissan was reluctant to lay off workers or shut down factories quickly to cut expenses. By 1997, Nissan's debt had ballooned to nearly 2 trillion yen. Credit rating agencies downgraded Nissan's bonds to junk status, and the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. To avoid collapse, Nissan sought external assistance. After thorough evaluations, only Daimler Chrysler and Renault were willing to step in. Daimler Chrysler, after examining Nissan's financial health, withdrew from negotiations. Ghosn ultimately used Renault's last reserve of over $5 billion to acquire 36.8% of Nissan shares, giving him the authority to appoint a COO to lead Nissan's reform. Naturally, he chose himself for the role, who better to tackle a mess than the master cleaner. Ghosn went to Nissan after Renault entered into an alliance with Nissan in 1999. Within 3 months, he introduced a 3-year revival plan for Nissan. The plan had 3 main objectives: cut operating costs by 1 trillion yen, reduce interest-bearing debt by half, and return to profitability within 2 years, achieving a profit margin of 4.5%. Ghosn even issued a military-style order, declaring that if any of these targets were not met, he could be removed from his position as COO. The announcement sparked a media frenzy in Japan. Meeting even half of these targets would be seen as a resurrection for Nissan. Achieving all the goals would be akin to Kazuo Inamori himself passing the mantle of business management to Ghosn. How would he accomplish this? His strategy remained unchanged, establishing cross-functional management teams and implementing significant cuts. Given the scale and complexity of Nissan's multi-trillion yen business, more drastic measures were required. Ghosn set up 10 cross-functional management teams, each responsible for a different business module, and personally led these teams to execute the revival plan's details. When it came to cost-cutting, Ghosn took bold actions. Over 3 years, he shut down 5 factories, increasing the company's capacity utilization rate to over 80%, and laid off 21,000 employees, which was 14% of Nissan's total workforce. In Japan, this move was seen as a direct affront to societal norms, completely disregarding business ethics. Additionally, he reduced the number of parts suppliers from 1,145 to just over 500 and cut the number of equipment and service suppliers from more than 6,900 to around 3,400. The goal was to increase the supply volume from each supplier, thereby lowering costs, a move that was even more radical. This decision forced several companies dependent on Nissan orders into bankruptcy, creating a more uncontrollable chain reaction in society than direct layoffs. For instance, the steel industry underwent a seismic shift due to Nissan's cuts, compelling several major steel companies to merge to withstand the impact. Socially, Nissan became a public enemy in Japan, with angry citizens repeatedly protesting in the streets, and Ghosn requiring bodyguards for his safety. Before Ghosn, other executives wanted to implement similar measures, but none had the courage to challenge social norms. Ghosn, an outsider, disregarded these norms and treated death threats from all over Japan as insignificant. Unconcerned with Japanese rules and ethics, he used his cross-functional management teams and extensive grassroots research to drive change. Visiting factories and attending meetings, he worked tirelessly. Remarkably, within a few months, Nissan's reforms began to show results. Nissan's reforms proved effective, achieving $2.7 billion in profits within just 1 year. But Ghosn's strategic maneuvers were far from over. In 2000, he was promoted to CEO of Nissan. Under his leadership, the company began to expand its production and sales targets to emerging markets like China. To succeed in these new markets, Nissan had to focus on producing affordable cars with simpler technology and less complex manufacturing processes, moving beyond its high-performance vehicles. As a result, Ghosn pushed Nissan to capitalize on the benefits of globalization. By 2003, the 3-year revival plan had exceeded its targets. Ghosn then introduced the 108 plan, aiming to increase annual car sales by 1 million units, achieve zero debt, and attain an industry-leading operating profit margin of 8% by 2005. The plan was a success, and Nissan rose to become a top-tier global car manufacturer. At this moment, Ghosn was hailed as a business titan in Japan, embodying the esteemed tradition of Japanese corporate leadership. This Brazilian-born Lebanese man had become a symbol of Japan's rich history and tradition of excellence. People quickly forgot how he had caused job losses, forcing many to start over from scratch. Instead, they were captivated by the Ghosn myth, the Ghosn magic, and the Ghosn effect. Whenever Ghosn appeared in public, he was surrounded by admirers. Some even compared him to Commodore Perry, who opened Japan to the West, and General MacArthur, who oversaw Japan's post-war recovery. In 2004, the Emperor of Japan personally awarded Ghosn the Blue Ribbon Medal. In 2005, Louis Schweitzer stepped down as CEO of Renault, and Ghosn was unsurprisingly chosen as his successor. At this point, Ghosn was a superstar in the business world, simultaneously leading 2 Fortune 500 companies and becoming the most powerful executive in the global automotive industry. He had reached the pinnacle of his career. But was Ghosn satisfied with this? Not at all. His experiences at Michelin had taught him a valuable lesson: no matter how well a professional manager performs, they are ultimately just high-ranking employees, akin to valuable but replaceable assets. Corporate governance is driven by boards, shareholders, and governments, forces that form a deep, pervasive will. Ghosn aspired to become part of this underlying force. It's essential to understand the structure of the Renault-Nissan alliance. It was based on cross-shareholding. This strategic alliance aimed to leverage shared resources, technology exchange, and coordinated procurement to reduce costs for both companies. For example, the Nissan Rogue sold in the US was manufactured at Renault's plant in South Korea. In the era of platform-based car manufacturing, a platform developed by one company could be utilized by other brands within the alliance, further cutting expenses. In 2017 alone, the alliance saved an impressive $6.5 billion. Ghosn, a strong advocate for cost-cutting and efficiency, naturally wanted the alliance to be as cohesive and robust as possible. To Ghosn, the Renault-Nissan alliance was an expanded version of his favorite cross-functional teams, now operating across companies, making it easier to consolidate power and control efficiently. When Schweitzer handed over the reins to Ghosn, he intended for Ghosn to focus solely on Renault. However, Ghosn had different plans. He not only wanted to maintain control over Nissan but also aimed to create a new order through the alliance structure. With his dual CEO role, Ghosn began to shape his leadership persona. Previously, he was seen wearing glasses and Nissan's work jacket, appearing as a straightforward, pragmatic middle-aged engineer. But gradually, people noticed changes. He started wearing elevator shoes, got a haircut, underwent LASIK surgery, and swapped his work jacket for tailored suits. His frequent haunts shifted from factory floors to Japanese baseball stadiums, F1 circuits, and TV studios filled with cameras and spotlights. His interactions transitioned from frontline workers to the elite in politics, business, and entertainment at parties. To gain favor with Japanese society, he even wore traditional kimonos and practiced bowing at a 90-degree angle like a typical Japanese business leader. Due to his dual roles, he split his time between Japan and France, spending 1 week in each country. Simultaneously, he held board positions at American companies like Sony and IBM. Most of his time was spent either at high-profile events or in the air at 30,000 feet, far removed from hands-on management. This reliance on executives to execute tasks fueled his insecurity, leading him to seek even more power. Thus, Ghosn transformed from a problem solver into an autocrat, with executives following his orders unquestioningly. As his power peaked, Ghosn seemed to lose touch. People began to see the darker side of this once revered figure. In 2006, Ghosn decided to cut costs at Renault's technical center by 30% and implemented a high-pressure management style. This led to 3 employee suicides within just 4 months, sparking widespread criticism of his authoritarian approach in French society. In 2010, Ghosn received an anonymous tip-off alleging that 3 executives were leaking company secrets to business spies. He acted quickly by firing the 3 individuals, but later investigations proved the accusations to be baseless, turning the situation into a national embarrassment in France. Then President Nicolas Sarkozy demanded accountability from Renault's management, leading Ghosn to dismiss the CEO to take the fall. This incident marked the start of Ghosn's declining reputation in France, with a similar situation emerging in Japan. That same year, a new Japanese policy required high-income earners to disclose their earnings. Ghosn's salary was revealed to be an astounding 8 million euros, or over $1 billion, causing public outrage. When the media questioned him about his salary, he astonishingly claimed to be underpaid, comparing his earnings to the Ford CEO, whose salary was 3 times higher. Additionally, Ghosn was involved in a car accident in Tokyo, where it was revealed that the Nissan CEO was driving a Porsche, sparking further controversy. Despite these issues, Ghosn's position within the multinational alliance remained secure. While the media focused on these scandals, shareholders prioritized company performance. Ignoring the controversies, Ghosn's achievements in reviving Nissan and becoming the dual CEO were still noteworthy. During the 2008 global economic crisis, when the automotive industry was struggling and giants like General Motors and Toyota faced significant losses, Nissan defied the odds by increasing production. In 2016, Nissan took advantage of Mitsubishi's fuel consumption scandal and quality crisis, acquiring 34% of Mitsubishi shares for 237 billion yen, forming the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance. In its second year, the alliance achieved global sales of 10.6 million units, surpassing Volkswagen to become the world leader. All of this occurred under Ghosn's leadership. As long as the company's performance was strong, the CEO's personal scandals were considered secondary. From 2005 to 2015, Ghosn worked diligently to strengthen the ties between the 2 companies, bolstering his reputation as a leader in globalization and multinational corporations. His plan was to maximize integration, making the companies completely dependent on the alliance and ultimately losing their independence. This would potentially lead to a merger into a single automotive group, elevating Ghosn from a professional manager to the true soul of the company. However, things did not go as planned. On November 19, 2018, when Ghosn's plane landed at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, officers from the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office boarded the plane and arrested him. On the same day, Ghosn's close associate, Nissan's HR director Greg Kelly, was summoned from the US to Japan and detained at Narita Airport. Following Ghosn's arrest, Nissan immediately held a press conference. Hiroto Saikawa, Carlos Ghosn's former ally and Nissan's second-in-command, leveled serious accusations against Ghosn on behalf of the company. The investigation revealed that for many years, Ghosn and Greg Kelly had underreported their compensation in their Tokyo Stock Exchange filings. Additionally, Saikawa claimed that Ghosn had committed several other significant misconducts, including the personal misuse of company assets. To the outside world, Nissan's sudden move against Ghosn appeared to be a long-planned coup. As the investigation deepened, the primary accusations against Ghosn became clearer. First, his salary. For a long time, Ghosn was dissatisfied with his compensation, believing it should match that of American executives. However, due to Japan's high income disclosure regulations, he had to cut his salary in half. To maintain his high earnings, Ghosn instructed Greg Kelly to devise a plan for substantial deferred compensation in the form of consulting fees after retirement. This plan spanned from 2011 to 2018, with Ghosn expected to receive 8 billion yen from Nissan upon retirement. This amount was essentially a liability for Nissan, but it was not reflected in the financial statements, violating the Financial Instruments and Exchange Act. The second accusation involved a trust agreement Ghosn signed with a bank to protect his yen-based salary from currency fluctuations when converted to dollars. The collateral was Nissan stock. During the 2008 financial crisis, Nissan's stock plummeted and the yen surged, prompting the bank to require Ghosn to increase his collateral. Ghosn then used his connections to secure funds from a Saudi car dealer for the collateral. Subsequently, he used a CEO reserve fund from Nissan, earmarked as marketing expenses, to pay this Saudi businessman over $14 million. The third accusation involved a transfer of $5 million from Nissan to a dealership in Oman, which funneled the money to a company controlled by Ghosn in Lebanon, eventually becoming his personal funds. There were also allegations of using company assets to purchase private residences, covering personal travel expenses, awarding fictitious jobs to his family, and granting himself additional bonuses. These accusations provided Nissan with a legitimate reason to detain Ghosn, shifting control back to the Japanese leadership represented by Saikawa. It was clear to any observer that this was a calculated move to oust Ghosn. But why did Nissan suddenly turn against the hero who had once saved them? To understand this, one must delve into the alliance between Nissan and Renault. In 1999, when Renault came to Nissan's rescue as a white knight, the struggling Nissan had no choice but to accept the help. Whoever had the money was the boss. However, nearly 20 years later, the revitalized Japanese felt increasingly that the partnership was unfair. In 2017, Nissan's market value was a substantial $35 billion, while Renault's was only $20 billion. Nissan sold 6 million units annually, compared to Renault's 3.8 million. Clearly, they weren't in the same league. In contrast, Nissan's 15% ownership in Renault didn't come with voting rights. The Japanese viewed Nissan as a national pride, and the longer they partnered with Renault, the more they felt the deal was unfair. If it were just about money and voting rights, it might have been manageable. The Japanese didn't harbor a specific grudge against Renault. These shares carried double voting rights, meaning the Élysée Palace could exert influence over Nissan through Renault. From 2015 onwards, Japan and France had several confrontations over this matter. In 2015, then-French Economy Minister Emmanuel Macron sought to increase the government's stake in Renault to 19.73%, thereby tightening control over the company. Nissan, naturally sensitive to this, countered by proposing to increase its stake in Renault to over 25%. According to Japan's cross-shareholding laws, if Nissan's stake in Renault exceeded 25%, Renault's 43.4% stake in Nissan would lose its corresponding voting rights. Due to Japan's strong opposition, the French government had to back down. The confrontation ended with Nissan's victory, but the French did not relent. Controlling Nissan could provide the French government with substantial economic benefits and market advantages, making it politically advantageous. Consequently, conflicts frequently arose within the alliance, often represented by Ghosn and Hiroto Saikawa. Saikawa had long been Ghosn's key deputy at Nissan, and their relationship was strong. However, by 2016, subtle differences in their visions for the company's development began to emerge. Ghosn pushed for aggressive expansion, leveraging lower costs and prices to boost sales, believing that a stronger alliance would increase his influence. Saikawa, however, was more conservative. He argued that the alliance shouldn't engage in reckless price wars just to maintain its presence. Instead, it was crucial to ensure profitability and protect Nissan's brand value. This ongoing power struggle between France and Japan forced Ghosn to make a strategic retreat. He stepped down as CEO of Nissan but retained his position as chairman, appointing Saikawa as his successor. Ghosn hoped to reassure the Japanese and believed he could still control Nissan through Saikawa. However, once in charge, Saikawa immediately slowed down the expansion, following his own vision, which greatly displeased Ghosn. He frequently hinted at merging Nissan with Renault and sought to replace Saikawa. In early 2018, under pressure from the French government, Ghosn renewed his 4-year contract with Renault, with the stipulation that he must make the Renault-Nissan alliance irreversible. For Nissan's local faction, this was a battle to safeguard Japan's automotive industry. Ghosn, once hailed as Nissan's savior, had come to be seen as a representative of French interests and a foreign invader. While he was signing a contract with the French government, a secret investigation against him had already begun within Nissan. By the end of 2018, Saikawa's management team made their move, leading to Ghosn's arrest. Japan's judicial system is notably different from those in other Western countries. The Japanese prosecution uses a method known as hostage justice, which involves prolonged detention to restrict personal freedom and coerce confessions. If a suspect remains silent, they can be detained for several months. The prosecution also has the power to decide whether suspects can meet with their lawyers and if lawyers can participate in interrogations. In such an isolating and pressured environment, many suspects eventually confess. This practice contributes to Japan's criminal conviction rate being as high as 99%. According to the Japanese plan, the issue would be resolved once Ghosn confessed and was sentenced to 10 years. However, Ghosn remained resilient, steadfastly maintaining his innocence and asserting that the Japanese police had wrongfully accused him. He claimed that the money in question was actually part of regular transactions with dealers. This stalemate left Renault in a difficult position, having to balance its alliance with Nissan while supporting Ghosn and managing the leadership vacuum caused by his absence. France responded strongly to the crisis. In August 2019, President Macron approached Prime Minister Abe at the G7 summit, urging him to intervene and release Ghosn. Ghosn, still the chairman and CEO of Renault, was deemed inappropriately detained in Japan. Lebanon and Brazil, Ghosn's other home countries, also applied diplomatic pressure on Japan. The global legal community began scrutinizing Japan's hostage justice system, criticizing it from a human rights perspective. However, the Japanese were resolute in dismantling Ghosn's influence, believing the company couldn't function with him. In January 2019, Ghosn resigned from Renault, and the company seized the opportunity to distance itself from him. This marked the end of Ghosn's 20-year career at Renault, leaving him a complete outcast. The companies Ghosn had once saved, Nissan and Renault, now saw him as a relic of the past. The business world is brutally realistic. When someone leaves, the warmth quickly fades. Following Ghosn's arrest, the faction led by Hiroto Saikawa began purging Ghosn's loyalists within Nissan's global structure. After 5 months under the control of Japanese prosecutors, Renault also started investigating Ghosn's legacy, scrutinizing all his actions during his tenure. If they wanted to uncover dirt on Ghosn, there was plenty to find. In France, it was soon discovered that Ghosn had diverted income meant to be taxed in France to a subsidiary in the Netherlands, a known tax haven, under the guise of the Renault-Nissan alliance. Additionally, there were millions of dollars in questionable expenses, including allegations of misappropriation of company funds for personal use and the concealment of a large amount of remuneration. A harsh reality was that while the Japanese saw Ghosn as a representative of French interests, not all French people liked him. Under his aggressive management, the French government's influence at Renault steadily declined. His frequent layoffs caused political issues that the government had to address. More importantly, Ghosn aimed to create a multinational group that would transcend the national interests of Japan and France, with him at the helm, which conflicted with the French government's vision. Moreover, Ghosn's flamboyant and self-serving behavior displeased many in France. In 2014, to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Renault-Nissan alliance, Carlos Ghosn hosted an extravagant party at the Palace of Versailles in France. The event, costing €600,000 and attended by 200 guests, coincided with Ghosn's 60th birthday rather than the actual anniversary of the alliance's formation in 1999. The guests were not company personnel but Ghosn's personal friends and family. Even Louis Schweitzer, Ghosn's former boss and a co-founder of the alliance, was not invited. This caused a significant uproar, but Ghosn remained unfazed. Just 2 days later, Ghosn married his second wife, Carol, at Versailles, hosting an opulent Marie Antoinette-themed fashion party. Of course, he did not pay for the wedding himself. The expenses were covered by Renault's sponsorship funds for Versailles. Given these considerations, Renault could easily discard Ghosn and accept the ensuing temporary chaos. Thus, Ghosn had to face the Japanese judicial system alone. Since October 2018, he had been under scrutiny for nearly a year. During this period, he spent half his time detained in a small, unheated cell without a mattress, measuring just 4 to 5 square meters. The rest of the time, after managing to post a multimillion-dollar bail, he was under strict surveillance. He was followed whenever he went out, and his communications and meetings with family and lawyers were closely monitored. He never knew when the prosecution might bring new charges and arrest him again. This is the power of Japan's hostage justice system. Ghosn knew he was playing a game of who would blink first with the Japanese prosecutors, and he wasn't sure how long he could hold out. At this point, escaping became an option. But first, where could he escape to? Ghosn was born in Brazil, but his family was from Lebanon. He had spent half of his teenage years in Beirut. Conveniently, Lebanon had no extradition agreement. If he could return to his homeland, he could evade the Japanese prosecutors and other countries' pursuits. Moreover, Ghosn had a positive image in his home country. Once back, he would enjoy complete freedom, at least in Beirut. To plan his escape, Ghosn turned to experts. Through his wife, Carol, he met Michael Taylor, a former U.S. Special Forces Green Beret and head of an international security company. Taylor and Carol were cousins with Lebanese heritage, and Taylor had experience rescuing hostages in places like Afghanistan. With Carol's introduction, Michael decided to help Ghosn escape from Japan. At that time, Ghosn had been granted bail after paying $9 million, but his residence was still under surveillance. To bypass the monitoring, he bought a phone on the black market and used it to contact Michael. He used the sound of the shower as cover to avoid detection, and together they planned the escape route. They ultimately decided on a private jet because it wouldn't require rigorous security checks upon departure. To avoid being followed, Ghosn played a psychological trick by leaking to the media that he was going to give an interview to show how he was being followed. On the day of the interview, he noticed that all the surveillance personnel had been withdrawn. After several interviews, he realized that there would be no followers whenever he was scheduled to be interviewed. Timing and route were crucial. Michael suggested escaping during the New Year holiday, when regular staff at the private airport would be off, replaced by temporary workers who were unfamiliar with the procedures and thus less vigilant. Michael would disguise himself as a musician, bringing a stage prop box and renting a private jet to Osaka, using the box to smuggle Ghosn out. With everything set, they sprang into action. Early on December 29, Michael landed at Osaka Airport, confirming that private jets leaving the country did not require luggage checks. He then took a bullet train to Osaka with 2 assistants. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Ghosn made preparations. He called a journalist, which, as expected, temporarily lifted the surveillance on him. Ghosn left his apartment and headed to the Grand Hyatt Tokyo, room 933, to meet Michael. Disguised with a mask, sunglasses, and a hat, he was accompanied by the agents. They took a taxi to the station and then a bullet train to Osaka. At 7:21 p.m., they arrived at a hotel in Osaka where the box was ready for Ghosn. He climbed inside, and Michael locked it immediately, preventing any hesitation from Ghosn. Thus began the final stage of their escape. A truck transported Ghosn and the other props to the plane. To make the musician disguise more convincing, Michael also brought several guitar cases. By 10:20 p.m., they reached the terminal. After a tense moment, they boarded the plane. At 11 p.m., the plane took off, heading towards Istanbul for a brief stop before continuing on to Beirut, Lebanon. By the last day of December, the global media was in an uproar. Ghosn had miraculously appeared at the presidential palace in Beirut the previous evening and had a private meeting with Lebanese President Michel Aoun. News spread quickly, and soon the whole world knew that Ghosn had escaped from Japan and returned to Lebanon. The Japanese government was even more shocked. Ghosn's escape not only mocked Japan's judicial system but also delivered a stinging rebuke to its extended detention practices. The Minister of Justice stated in a press conference that Japan would not let this go unchallenged. However, faced with Lebanon, which has no extradition treaty with Japan, measures like Interpol's red notice for Ghosn and the Japanese authorities' arrest warrant for his wife were limited in effect. For a nation that values its pride, this was a deeply humiliating moment. Having regained his freedom, Ghosn quickly held a grand press conference. During the 2-hour event, he launched a full-scale attack on Japan's harsh judicial system, criticized Hiroto Saikawa and several Nissan executives who betrayed him, and reiterated his innocence. This was the counterattack he had been waiting for during the 13 months of his detention. However, with his newfound freedom, global public opinion had shifted. When Ghosn was under Japanese control, people might have sympathized with him, but now that he could confront the Japanese government on more equal footing, his own misconduct came under greater scrutiny. As investigations continued, more of Ghosn's illicit activities came to light, and more governments and organizations began filing charges and issuing warrants against him. For a man nearing 70, living in exile and under armed guard in Beirut increasingly felt like being in a large prison. More cruelly, no matter how much he criticized Nissan, attacked the Japanese government, or predicted the collapse of the Renault-Nissan alliance through writing books, giving interviews, and participating in forums, his efforts seemed futile. After his ousting from the automotive industry, both Renault and Nissan faced short-term turmoil, each rapidly replacing multiple CEOs. Yet, without him, they found a new balance. By the second half of 2023, the two companies signed a new agreement extending their alliance for another 15 years and announced a mutual 15% stake holding, symbolizing nominal equality. In the business world, past conflicts can be overlooked as long as there is potential for future profit. Meanwhile, as Ghosn's drama unfolded, the global automotive industry was undergoing an even greater revolution. Carlos Ghosn was more than just a professional manager, he was a firefighter, a temporary fix. In an interview with Forbes last year, Ghosn reflected on Elon Musk, saying, "He created his own company, I didn't. That was my mistake. If I had founded an electric vehicle or battery startup, my situation would be entirely different now." But deep down, Ghosn likely knew he wasn't Musk, and he wouldn't allow himself to start from scratch as the CEO of a startup. In the end, there's a significant gap between a professional manager and a founder that's hard to bridge. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel.